Welcome to this unexpected bonus episode of SADDO, the Sitcom Archive Deep Dive Overdrive, with me, Eggs Benedict.
And me, Alison Barton-Simmons.
This is one we have publicised that we were going to put out, but the opportunity came along and we're going to do it. But before we get stuck into what we're doing here, I think it's probably high time we just announce what we'll be doing in Series 3.
And it is Dear John.
Yes, the SADDOs voted en masse. Well, not en masse, but enough of you voted. And it was a tie. Reggie Perrin and Dear John both came up top in terms of what you wanted us to deep dive next. So we just decided to start with Dear John, and we'll move on to Reggie Perrin next year. It's quite good, really, because we get to do two that we know our listeners really want to hear us do. So that's exciting, isn't it? I'm
very excited. I can't wait to get started.
I love Dear John. So yeah, that'll be starting shortly after Christmas, and it'll follow our usual style of watch along, listen along. We'll share links to where you can see Dear John online, and then you can listen to us pull it apart and talk about Ralph, Kirk, Louise, John, and whoever the other one is, Mrs. Arnott. Is it
the lady with the hat? Yeah.
Yeah, he was actually married to Boise in real life, but we'll get into that when we start.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Anyway, let's just focus on what we're doing here today. First of all, this bonus episode is a collaboration that we've decided somewhat last minute to do with the lovely fellas Alan and Gareth from the British Sitcom History Podcast, also known as Britcom Pod, on social media. Hi guys, how are you?
Yeah. Hello. Hi. Hello. Nice to be here. Nice to join you.
The British Sitcom History Podcast is a very thorough, very well-researched and very different to our podcast, which goes into sometimes 2 episodes covering, it's either a single episode or a double episode you do covering your favourite sitcoms of yesteryear, and sometimes even more contemporary ones, isn't it?
Yeah, what we tend to do, Ben, is we aim to do 1 episode, but we ramble on for so long that we have to cut it in 2 because we just got...
Yeah, it was never supposed to be 2 episodes.
Well, you got so much to say. I mean, this is why we give ourselves bloody 18, 30 episodes. There's so much to discuss.
Well, what I like about your podcast is you get right into the nitty-gritty of every episode, whereas we take a bit more of an overview. And so you can't quite get into individual gags and costumes and things. That's why I like your podcast.
But the way we structure our show is we will look at the series as a whole, but we'll pick one specific episode to go through in a bit more detail, which is exactly to accomplish that. So you can get into the nitty gritty of it. You can go into the scenes and use that as a way to analyze a character or whatever, to create a bigger picture, and then kind of just give more information and research about the series as a whole. So we're trying to kind of do both in one go.
Yeah. It saves you getting jaded as well. The last thing you want to do is pick... We're conscious of potentially picking something that we get really fed up of very quickly and are committed to watching every episode of.
If you were in that scenario, let's say you get a series into something and you really are sick of it, do you think you would jack it in, or are you the sort of person who always reads to the end of a book no matter what?
Power through.
Right. Have to. But I mean, a lot of our listeners wanted us to do watching the ITV sitcom, and that's what 60 episodes are, something like that.
Yeah, I liked the idea initially of doing watching, but when you said how many episodes there were, I just pictured myself sort of 3/4 of the way through, and worried that it would just start ruining my life.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen. Yeah. I want to enjoy it because we're friends and we want to. Our time together doing the podcast is fab. I love it. And I don't want it to become something that I'm then going, I just don't want to.
Oh, it's his face again. Christ. Yeah.
Here he is.
Here he is going on about this bloody Scouse sitcom. So let's just have a quick talk about why we're doing this collaboration episode.
I'm not sure. I know I used the word collaboration first, but it's got unfortunate connotations. I feel like I'm putting people on trains.
Collaborator. Yeah. Well, how else can we say it?
I don't know.
Let's say it's a coalition. That's a nice clean word.
Coalition post 2010. That's got negative implications for me as well.
Right. Well, okay. We'll call it a coalition episode. One of us has the power, like David Cameron, and one of us doesn't, like Nick Clegg. I'm not sure who's filling whose boots there. But yes, we're gonna actually have a look at one of the ill-fated American remakes of Fawlty Towers, of which there were several. There was Amanda, starring Be Arthur, of course, which ran for nearly a series before it was cancelled. There was Whispering Pines, starring John Larroquette in the late 90s. John Larroquette's quite a good comedic actor, actually, but you wouldn't know it from watching this awful remake of Fawlty Towers.
He's a royal pain. Can you imagine that? They
Royal Pain.
called the
That was the
character,
name of the character.
Royal Pain.
Yeah,
Royal is not a name. I'll give you Pain as a surname.
Royal, no.
But that's just, it's pathetic.
And, of course, there was also Over the Top, which isn't really a Fawlty Towers remake, but it kind of nicks some of the settings and characters from Fawlty Towers, which had Tim Curry and a very young Steve Carell in as the Manuel character. But the one we're going to focus on today is Snaveley from 1978.
So Snaveley was the first attempt to remake Fawlty Towers, and it's the purest, I guess. It was made even before the second series of Fawlty Towers was made. And it is the most straightforward, hey, let's just take these characters, put them in America, and it's essentially the same thing. Obviously, we'll get into the details of what they've changed.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the later ones, it's much more adapted to fit. Like, so with the Amandas, for example, it's just Be Arthur. She doesn't have a spouse to bounce off of. It's just kind of Basil without Sybil. So that's a big miss straight away. But yeah, so Snaveley, it was made in 1978 as a pilot, and that's as far as it got. It was not turned into a series. Are you surprised by that?
Well, I am a little bit, I thought it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
I felt similar. I felt there was more of a warmth to it than Fawlty. Especially the Sybilish character of Mrs. Snaveley just felt. I've got a bit of a hatred for the Sybil character. I don't like her at all. But I felt like Betty White's version of the wife in the sitcom.
I think we should just call her Sybil. I'm happy with that. Just call her Sybil.
Mrs. Snaveley.
She's called Gladys.
She is called Gladys. I felt more of an affinity towards her.
Oh, that's interesting. So I felt it was. I agree that it was very similar. It felt like a remake of well, it was the Hotel Inspectors mostly, wasn't it? But I don't know. It was like Bizarro Fawlty Towers. It just felt like it was in a different octave or something. It just didn't quite chime. I'm quite looking forward to talking about it actually, because I sort of watched it and I thought it wasn't as bad as I expected. I totally agree with you there. But I'm not sure. I can't quite make my mind up over it. Did I enjoy that, or was it just sort of the wrong note or something? So yeah, let's talk about it.
Well, I think to answer your question though, I am actually surprised it didn't get picked up, because although it was sanitized for an American audience and changed, I would have thought they gobbled it up. And I actually, in my reading, read that it was actually received quite well. So why they didn't pick it up, perhaps you can enlighten us later, Alan.
Well, one question I have is, how popular is Fawlty Towers in America, and how popular was it? Did that come later? Was Fawlty Towers itself ever screened?
Well, I think, Fawlty Towers is one of those things that is translated across the world really well, like not just in English-speaking countries even. And yes, I think it is one of the kind of the British flank of comedy that has done well in America. Because there's a lot of physical comedy in there, I think it works. There's a lot of very universal themes of just anger and frustration. But there is something quite innately British about it. Very much the class system is put under the microscope in Fawlty Towers. And Basil Fawlty is the epitome of the middle class, I look up to him, I look down to him kind of attitude. And we see that a lot. And I'm interested to see how well that would translate to an American audience, because I don't think it does, basically. But yeah, it was. I know Fawlty Towers has done well in America, but I couldn't tell you by 1978 it was already there and doing well. I'm not sure how quickly.
Yeah, it must have been later, mustn't it? I would assume with them trying to remake and Snaveley first.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah, I would have thought Fawlty Towers would have been a sort of cult type thing that people would have picked up later. I don't think it's ever going to be network prime time, is it?
I think looking at our stats for our listeners, we did have a big American pickup for Series 2.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Because Series 1 was The Good Life. That was shown in America as Good Neighbours, and we did have some American listeners, but you could tell that I think there's a Fawlty friends of ours over in Australia who run the Sitcom Showdown, they refer to it as the Fawlty Bump, which is kind of why we did it, because everyone loves Fawlty Towers.
Right, yeah.
So you get a little bit of a boost by deep diving it.
Yeah.
So should we get stuck into the episode? And
Yeah, talk us through it.
So it opens, doesn't it, to the exterior of Snaveley, not Snaveley Towers, Snaveley Manor.
Snaveley
Yes.
Manor, yes.
It's kind of a nice looking gaff from the outside in a very 1978 way. I thought I could see myself booking into Snaveley Manor. What about you?
Well, as with all American remakes, it just looks bigger. The interiors and exteriors all look bigger when they go to America.
Can I jump in straight away? The name Snaveley. Obviously, it's the character's surname. I think that's much better than Fawlty. And we actually didn't pick up on this when we talked about Fawlty Towers. But I think that's a crap name. Because Fawlty is not really a surname. And it's like, ooh, Fawlty Towers. You get it? It's faulty.
Not quite right.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, actually. You're right. I've never even considered that.
Yeah.
Snaveley doesn't mean anything, but it just sounds like snivelling and kind of... It's just a sort of grotesque word.
5 minutes ago, we were taking the mick at the Americans with using Royal Pain. That's not a name. Well, I suppose you could say the same about Basil Fawlty, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's one of those things that now you see it and you think, oh yeah, Basil Fawlty.
True,
and the fact that Fawlty
Yeah.
Towers is even a pun is sort of lost. It's just Basil Fawlty's place, isn't it? So, but yeah, I do like the name Snaveley. It's just got the right level of grotesqueness about it. And
Well, it's a bit snivelly, isn't it? That's
Snivelly and snidey, yeah.
What about what the first thing I wrote down in my notes? The very first thing was, the sign is spelled correctly.
Of course,
That's no
yeah.
good, is it?
Yeah.
That's no good. So there was no mail boy. No, there was no paper boy coming over and changing the letters around.
Well, they don't even get off their bikes in America, do they? They just throw the mail and throw the newspaper from the bike into the garden. So
Exactly.
he hasn't got time to stop. He's American. He's a busy boy.
Now I'm just trying to think of a
Well,
anagram of
Alan,
Snaveley Manor.
I have done the thinking for you.
Oh, brilliant!
So
Manly valor.
I came up with, and when I say I came up with, let's full disclosure here, I used an anagram thing on the internet.
Oh, you cheat.
What I came up with was Elvin Masonry,
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Von Manslayer, or,
Yeah, all right.
or Man Layovers.
Oh, yeah.
Layovers.
Man
That's
Layovers
like
is
that.
a good one.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a
Layovers.
motel, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very good.
Although, you know, if we're going to be pedantic about it, in Fawlty Towers, they sometimes moved letters around and dropped letters, didn't they?
They do.
But yeah, that was I'm already, I haven't even started yet, and I'm already like, oh, this isn't right. This isn't right. It's not as good as Fawlty Towers. Right, shall we go inside the building?
Yeah, when we go into the lobby and we see the first scene in the lobby, the Manuel character, who we later find out is named Pedro, is sort of awkwardly hanging around looking at the phone anxiously because the phone's ringing and his English isn't good enough and he's very nervous about, shit, the phone's ringing, what am I supposed to do here? And cue Golden Girls era Betty White comes bustling through with a load of shopping and answers the phone. Stavely Manor.
Amazing. I love that. I was so excited to see Betty White.
Yeah.
Were you a Golden Girls fan, Al?
I was a Golden Girls fan. I loved Golden Girls,
So
and
did I.
I just think that she's just one of the most genuinely lovely, non-Hollywood, despite the fact that she's sort of centred in Hollywood person. I think she's just fab.
Yeah, I like her. And I loved Golden Girls. That was right in my sort of era of watching.
Yeah.
Staying up on a Friday night watching Channel
Friday
4.
night, yeah.
This would have been not too long before the Golden Girls began, I think.
Yes.
So she looked very rose, didn't she?
She did.
Makeup and her hair and everything.
7 years before.
She tells the caller when she answers the phone, Roger, to hold on while she gives Pedro a toilet roll to take up to room 17. And instead of K, we get sort of animalistic grunt from Pedro.
Yeah.
He's sort of the same level of Manuel-esque confusion, but he's He's just not as well rounded a character, Pedro, because he doesn't speak hardly any English. Manuel spoke.
He's
pidgin
hardly
English.
a character. It's a shame, isn't it? It feels like it's a missed step right from the beginning.
To me, this is one of the biggest. This is the biggest miss. Actually, this is the biggest negative for it. Is that essentially the Manuel character's not really present. He's called Pedro, and my first thought was, well, that's interesting. A sort of a Hispanic character in America means something very different to a Spanish character in England. But actually, we find out later he's supposed to be Albanian. But it makes no difference because he never says a word. He never says anything other than just a sort of grunt. No.
But that does strike me as we don't want to make him Hispanic in America.
Yeah.
That has to, let's just make it Albania may as well be a made-up country. It can be like Frigonian.
In 1978, there are nobody's writing in from Albania to complain about the stereotype.
Do you think they were worried about political correctness in 1978 in America, being a more litigious society? I don't know. I
don't think they were worried about upsetting the commies in Albania.
Oh, that's true.
But they're just there's certain people you're gonna press on, but also it has to be someone kind of alien. I think if you have a Hispanic, there's enough of a Hispanic community in America that it doesn't feel like, oh well, that's obviously someone who's going to be completely out of their realm and it's totally alien.
Yeah.
You need someone who's completely separate. And in this case, he's Albanian, but who would know?
You wouldn't have thought there'd be a lot of Albanian refugees rocking up on provincial America, would you? But
I wouldn't have thought so. No.
Well, the actor is named Frank LaLoggia, which I'm guessing it means he's of Italian descent.
Yeah.
So close enough to Albania, isn't it?
Yeah, anyway.
But yeah, it's the one thing that I've noticed in attempts to remake Fawlty Towers is the Manuel character is so easy to get wrong. And I think when we talked about it, there is a certain skill to that. The balance of, okay, is he actually stupid or just lost in language? And certainly the way John Cleese justifies that character and how he says the reason that character works is because he never feels bad. Like, you never feel like he's the victim because he always just takes all the abuse with a smile and a thank you. As basically his justification. If you felt that he was being bullied and, I feel really bad for him, it wouldn't work as comedy.
It's true.
But that's a very thin line. And even on Fawlty Towers, they tread a very thin line with it. And obviously with that, it works.
It's easy to overlook how good Andrew Sachs is in the role. And it's when you see Manuel done poorly that you appreciate the subtleties of his naivety and in the way he plays Manuel with such naivety but charm at the same time, and
the physicality of it as well.
One of the things I loved about we're supposed to be reviewing Snaveley, and I keep getting distracted by Fawlty Towers because it's so good. One of the things I loved about Andrew Sachs' performance is he was like a sort of child. He would often sort of mimic Basil. I remember there was one occasion where Basil's jumping up and down, and Manuel's just sort of jumping alongside him because, like, almost like a duckling following its mum, you know.
Yeah.
And he just had that lovely sort of childlike element, you know. I agree with you. I think it was a really amazing performance, and you can see the difference here.
Yeah.
I don't think this Frank LaLoggia is doing anything wrong particularly, but there's just nothing there to do, is there?
No, don't blame him at all.
Yeah, it's a very underwritten character as well. Yeah, what they actually have him do, and we see the same jokes that we've seen in Fawlty Towers. So as we see Betty White's character, she does the signs where it says, the number of the room and up, an up arrow saying take this to this room. But when Basil does that in Fawlty Towers, there's the build up to it. It's time because he's on the phone, and so he's doing that because he can't speak to him. It's all kind of makes sense. Whereas she's on the phone and then she goes, "Oh, just bear with me a second," and then does it to him. So it makes sense because she's trying to communicate him without using English, but I don't know, it just doesn't work as well.
Well, she doesn't do it in an exasperated way, does she? She does it in a very patient way. It takes the.
She does it in a very Sybil way.
Yeah, she's not even very Sybil-like, really, this character. She's more Polly-like. Well, I'm sure we'll come on to that. But she's very patient and kind, as you would expect from a Betty White kind of character. But I just think the pacing is the big thing that's missing. the pacing of Cleese talks a lot about the pacing of Fawlty Towers. It's what keeps it going. And here it's just very gentle and sanitised and Americanised.
The jokes land, but it's more of like a small bounce rather than it hitting in the way that they do in Fawlty Towers, where there's sort of like in-your-face jokes. And I think in Snaveley they just feel a little, like you say, more gentle, expected humour and comedy, I think.
So one of the main problems in adapting something like this to an American version is, first of all, your American slot is, 22 minutes?
Yeah.
It doesn't translate as well to like a BBC 28 minutes. And you know, Fawlty Towers was always over-filmed anyway. They always overwrote it and then had to cut some stuff out. And also, bear in mind, this was a pilot. It's not necessarily supposed to stand up as a full episode. It's kind of like, here's a load of stuff, have a look at this. So they've taken a few bits from different episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So you've got to see it in those terms a little bit. Try not to judge it too harshly. But I think, as you guys have alluded to, it's sort of better than I expected it to be. It holds together as an episode.
It's watchable. It's not an aberration or anything, is it?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I was impressed.
In my experience with American sitcoms of this kind of era, especially ones that don't cross over here, they're like this. They're quite banal and broad and not very interesting, but they're fine. I've seen much worse sitcoms than this, put it that way, that ran for years and years.
If anything, Alda, it's the type of thing that you like, isn't it? Because you like warm, cosy,
I do.
No peril kind of thing.
Yes, no mild peril. I tell you what I did find quite comforting while I was watching it is that despite the fact that it's a different TV show, it's set in a different place and it's in a different sort of venue altogether, there was enough similarities in terms of where the doors were in rooms and the way that like the lobby looked and the way that the dining room looked, that it felt recognisable enough for me to feel like, oh, I get this. I get where this is based. I know this place, even though I'd never seen this show before, and obviously it was never to be seen again. But it felt there was enough connection with how Fawlty Towers looked and the feel of it for it to feel recognisable and comforting. Yeah, I did get the comfort.
I get that.
Element from
It's funny you should say that because John Larroquette's version flipped the layout of the lobby so the desk was on the right-hand side. And it just looked wrong. It's a bit like when I was watching the Daily Motion reverse versions that had been uploaded. Just didn't feel right.
Copyright free.
So the next thing is, of course, after Pedro takes the luggage upstairs. As Manuel departs, Betty's explaining to her caller, because we don't know Betty White's character's name at this point. We'll call her Betty White Sybil. She's explaining to her caller that they're about half full at the moment in the hotel, or they were that morning, but she's been out shopping. But the problem is that every time she leaves Henry, who's clearly the Basil character, she worries about how many guests they're going to lose. And at this point, you see the Henry character sort of lurking in the background, coming into view, listening to Sybil, Betty White flirting with her caller, whose name, we don't see he's an invisible character, but his name's Roger, and she's sort of flirting with him, and Henry is sort of mugging dramatically in disdain at this, isn't he, in the background?
Yeah. Oh, you devil, Raj. Oh, Raj.
What were your first impressions of him?
She's very flirty. She's very flirty with him.
Yeah.
Rog, she calls him Rog.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting, the different... Because obviously, I know, you get Sybil on the phone.
None of that, no.
And she's just, basically, the phone call is irrelevant. It's what she's ignoring is what's important. Whereas in this is a slightly different dynamic. She's flirting with this other fella, and that's kind of a different thing, isn't it?
I think when Sybil flirts, Basil is more contemptuous, whereas this guy, as we later find out, is jealous. Yes. I mean, Basil's not jealous, he just doesn't like her bringing the tone down. But Henry, Henry's like, oh, what's going on here with this Raj? Actually, I thought she was flirting with a guy called Raj at first. I thought it was like a Indian character or something because of the pronunciation.
For the 70s.
Well, Henry looks like a sort of a bit like Big Fat Ron, Ron Atkinson, the manager, the football manager. He's sort of all orange faced, and he's.
Ben, I think he's just Big Ron. I think you've added the fat there. That's a little unkind.
They used to sing Big Fat Ron's Claret and Blue Army. I'm sure they did. He's sort of he's all orange faced. He's got like a 5 head rather than a 4 head, and his tie's too lengthy, like Donald Trump. He's a bit of a mess looking guy, really, isn't he?
It's just a very poor video transfer. It's all yellow.
Is that all it is, do you think?
I don't know if it's that well done.
I was thinking if he's playing the Basil character, he might also share Big Ron Atkinson's racist proclivities as well. But,
yeah, perhaps.
Yeah,
just don't say the word.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
we learned nothing from the Major.
Well, I think that we're comparing him to John Cleese as Basil Fawlty. One thing that I think we probably didn't talk about when we covered Fawlty Towers is Cleese's dress, his outfit, his costume. And now comparing it, what they did really well with Basil Fawlty was he was dressed smartly, but looked not untidy, but just harassed. They made his costume look harassed, which is quite skillful.
It was that manic element of whatever he was wearing just looked manic, no matter what he had on.
Yeah, how do you do that with a suit and a tie?
A zip-up cardigan, and he just looks wild.
Is it the clothes, or is it Cleese? Is it the brilliance of Cleese acting in that role
Quite
that
possibly
conveys that?
I think he's just got that kind of body shape. It's just a bit too long and lanky that it's just nothing quite looks like it doesn't quite fit him.
No, Harvey Korman's a similar body type, isn't he? As Harvey Korman is our Henry in Snaveley.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's just not as gangly, I guess.
But yeah, I think my point is, it looks like someone's looked at Basil Fawlty and said, "Oh wow, they've done a great job on the costume there. Let's copy that," and it just doesn't work. And perhaps you're right, Alan, that it's Cleese is bringing something to that costume.
We see at this point Henry pop round the front of the counter, and he pops down a very unconvincing looking goat head, which is even worse than Basil's moose in the Germans. I mean, it looks like a big plush toy, doesn't it?
I couldn't figure out what it was
woolly eye
at first, because it was looking upwards, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was, and it took me a while to realise that it was actually a goat's head.
Yeah, you never see it face on, really.
Do people put goats' heads on the wall?
Is that a
thing?
No, thing in the States?
I understand that a moose head, I haven't got one in my living room, but I understand that is a thing that people do. But a goat's head, is that?
I've never heard of that.
It could be very hard to hunt a goat, could it? I mean,
maybe that's the joke. He went hunting, and that's all he got.
That's all he brought back.
But it also stinks, apparently. The goat's head stinks. So it's not been taxidermed very well.
No, well, the scene plays out where it becomes apparent that Sybil Betty White has been trying to get rid of this sort of dodgy-looking goat head for some time, but Henry's recovered it with a view to hang it in the lobby.
Yes.
But unlike Torquay Sybil, this incarnation of Sybil, Betty White Sybil, doesn't want this thing hung at all.
No.
She's sort of against it, isn't she?
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Henry also gets some exposition in here that he actually hates the hotel business. He hates the guests, the expenses. He's deliberately rationing the toilet roll so the guests stop wasting it, in a move that Sheryl Crow would probably approve of, eh?
Yeah.
You say exposition there. I mean, he just goes, "I hate the guests. I hate working in the hotel business."
Yeah, it's very clumsy. Very, very clumsy.
It's not subtly woven in. But again, this is a pilot episode. You want to establish the characters nice and quickly. So I'm not going to be too harsh about that. And it is we're getting quite a lot from his character straight away. And this is what Harvey Korman does. He's very big with the character, and I actually think that works really well. What I really liked was the dynamic of the two of them, because the way Betty White is playing it is quite deadpan. She doesn't really give much away, and whereas Harvey Korman is very big and over the top, and that is quite Basil and Sybil really as we know them. Sybil has her moments, obviously, but largely she's the cool-headed one. So I actually like that. I like the dynamic between the two, and we get the moment here with them in the office together, where we actually see quite a lot of that, and we get to establish those characters.
Yeah, I agree with you. The dynamic's actually quite good. It's different, subtly different, but it works. I think it's far from being the worst thing in this pilot. Let's put it that way.
Well, would this be a good time to give you a bit of background on these guys? I looked I looked into the actors because obviously I'm familiar with Betty White to an extent. She's something of a living legend, as of time of recording, still living.
Yeah.
And
Don't put the blockers on her, will you?
whereas Harvey Korman was fairly unknown to me, apart from this, really.
You're joking. See, this is where... Do either of you two know... Where do you know Harvey Korman from? One thing.
Nope.
No?
No.
Just me?
No.
He's the guy from Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
He's Hedley Lamar in Blazing Saddles.
No.
That's all I know him from. I looked on IMDb and I don't know him from anything else at all, but I instantly knew him as the guy from Blazing Saddles when I saw him.
Yeah.
That must be an age thing. I think I'm old.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with Blazing Saddles to remember that sort of specifics, I'm afraid. But yeah, he's Harvey. Basically, both Harvey Korman and Betty White at this point in 1978 were at a stage in their careers where they were looking for something. They were looking for the next big show because they'd both just left shows in which they were well established. So Harvey Korman was a supporting player on the Carol Burnett show, which was sort of variety sketch
comedy. Yeah.
And so he was a sketch comedy actor. And I think that comes across here. There's a subtle difference between sketch comedy acting and more sitcom comedy acting. It's subtle, but I do think we're seeing that here. And he left that show after 10 years, and he won a lot of awards on that show for like comedy awards and things. Like, he was a big deal, and he left that show in 1977 after 10 years. He was replaced by Dick Van Dyke, actually.
Interesting.
Another living legend at the time of broadcasting.
Yeah, just about. And yeah, he'd just been in Blazing Saddles. He did a few of things with Mel Brooks. And then in 1978, he got his own show called The Harvey Korman Show. That was a sitcom in which he was an actor/acting teacher. So the idea is he's a bit of a crap out of work actor with and bothering his agent all the time. And he lives with his daughter, and hilarity ensued.
Hasn't Michael Douglas just made that? There was a program on Netflix. I'm not going to remember what it was called because I haven't got a memory. But it was Michael Douglas who stars as an acting coach, and he runs a company with his daughter.
The Kaminsky Method.
The Kaminsky Method.
Yes.
Thank you, Al.
Saw a trailer
much
for it.
better memory
Very
than
good.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed it. But yeah, that sounds very much like what you just described.
It does.
Well, there you go. In the 70s, they would have called that the Michael Douglas Show.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's what they did. But so they made that in 78 and it didn't do anything. They did a handful of episodes and it just didn't go anywhere. And so he'd left this big success that he'd been on for a long time. He hadn't quite managed to break through. And then Betty White, similarly, like Betty White, she's so old that TV didn't even exist when she started acting. She started on the radio, and really fascinating. I was just reading up about Betty White. Like, you think, oh yeah, Betty White, I know Betty White, but I was reading about her, and there's a lot more going on there than I realised.
She was like a producer, wasn't she? She like an early female producer.
She was a big right from the 50s. She did a sitcom in the 50s, starting in 1952, called Life with Elizabeth, in which she was Elizabeth. She was the central character, and she was the producer on that. This is very early sitcom, and then she had her own show as well. She's had at least 3 shows called the Betty White Show of different formats, and yeah, there was one I was reading something. Again, this is in the 50s. A show she did. And she hired a female director. Like, that was very crazy in the 50s. And also they had a supporting actor, like it was a sketch show, who was a black man. And some of the southern networks were like, oh, we don't want to show this because there's a black person in it. And she was like, well, tough, you got to deal with it. And like, you just look into Betty White, she's on the right side of history, like all the way around. Like she's all very pro LGBT and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, very, very difficult to dislike her. Not that I'm trying. And then throughout the 60s, she just became really well known as being on all the game shows, all the panel shows and stuff like that. She was a personality.
Right. Is there an American version of Blankety Blank? Was she on?
Oh, The Match Game. Yes, certainly is. Yes.
I've become obsessed with Blankety Blank recently. I've been watching it on YouTube and it's brilliant. I love Les Dawson. I love Terry Wogan. It's absolute nostalgia for me. I absolutely love it. I've wasted far too much time this year watching Blankety Blank.
So yeah, in the 70s, Betty White, she started appearing in the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was a sitcom, and she was a supporting player in that. But that again she was a big performance for her. Like she became very well known off the back of that. Well, she was anyway, but this was a big show, and that finished in 1977. And so she was in really the same position. She got her own show called The Betty White Show, which was a sitcom in 1977. It didn't last. They just did a handful of episodes. So they're both in the same position. Very well-known TV stars, but, more supporting players, very well-respected, but they're not the leads exactly, looking for the next big hit.
So the question then, and maybe we should return to this question at the end, but why didn't it take off with that pedigree as you described it?
The expectations must have been so high. They must have sort of got in there with such belief.
Yeah. Well, I don't have an answer for that, so don't build it up.
I think these days it's very politicised as well. Whether you get a show or not depends on who you know a lot of the time. Just like the real world, the jobs that you get are less about what you know than who you know, or
that's it.
Who you've been with on the casting
But you
couch.
would have thought that those two, as Alan's described it, would have been well connected.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and good sellable names. Like you can sell this show on their names, if nothing else. So I think it's got the ingredients there.
Well, at this stage, out in reception, a kind of Pee Wee Herman attired looking dude rocks up, doesn't he, ringing the bell, and Henry goes out to demand that he stop that racket and wait his turn before turning on his heel and going back into the office, just showing his contempt that he has for all of his guests.
Yeah, really quite nasty.
Yeah.
It's not subtle, is it? He just shouts at the guests for no reason.
It's not just snarky, or narky, I should say. It's just downright obnoxious rude. And Betty White Sybil responds to Henry's mumbling and griping about Roger calling by telling him that Roger was only calling to tell them there were 3 hotel inspectors in town.
The hotel inspector.
Yeah, it sets the scene. I thought the dude out in reception was going to be like a Mr. Hutchison character.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to reserve NBC for the commencement of a televisual feast on Squawking Birds. But that never came to fruition. This character was definitely Cribbins' Mr. Hutchison, but much more sanitised and devoid of personality, really. He wasn't at all interesting or engaging like Cribbins' characters.
That's a tough act to follow, though. When you watch Bernard Cribbins in Fawlty Towers, there's a very much a sense of I can't see anyone else playing this in this way. You can give them the same script, you might get something else, but Cribbins is bringing a lot to that. And the way that he you can tell that he's just filling the space and with the dialogue, he never really stops talking. And it must not just be scripted, because he's just sort of muttering to himself sometimes. And Bernard Cribbins does a lot with that character. It's a fantastic performance.
Yeah, Cleese is very, very complimentary in the DVD commentary of Cribbins' performance, and that he recognises the brilliance of it, I think, and how it helped the pacing, which is what Cleese always talks about, how it carried the pacing along.
There's something that you guys talked about in your deep dives was the quality of the day players, of the people who just come in for one episode. The guest casting is amazing. In
they were all John Cleese's friends, though. They're all that's definitely who you know.
Well, sure. But my point is, it's perhaps a little unfair. It's a little unfair to compare this guy, and I mean him no disrespect, but he's just a jobbing actor on a pilot to Bernard Cribbins.
True, and as is the case in all of these portrayals in Snaveley, I don't really attribute much blame to the actors so much as the screenplay and the adapted screenplay. It doesn't give them a lot to work with.
There's not a lot to go with, is there? There was one good visual gag as we were introduced to Bernard Cribbins, where the goat's head is sitting on the counter, staring at the ceiling, and he sort of follows the goat's gaze up as if to say, "What's this goat looking at?" I quite enjoyed that.
I really liked that. Yeah. The actor who plays that, he's a jobbing actor, but he was a comedy specialist, and he was a well-known. He's one of those people you might not know his name, but you always knew his face.
Know his face.
Oh yeah, he's in that sort of thing. That's the sense I've got from reading about him. Jack Dodson, his name is. I think he has been brought in to lend that kind of comedy chops to it.
It's a shame that they didn't give him much to work with, really, then, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it's true with all these characters, really. And again, it's because this is a pilot. They've chopped up 3 plots and sort of pushed them together to try and pull something in.
Rushed it all in.
Going back to something that you said before, Alan, about the lead being on sketch shows. I must admit now, looking back, thinking about when I watched it, that Saturday Night Live feel, that live, on the spot, sketch show feel to what he was doing, rather than a sitcom feel to what he was doing. It did feel very like a live performance, if that makes sense.
Yes, which I have to say, I quite like that about sitcom. I like that about your more classic 70s, 80s sitcoms. It's in front of an audience, and I love it when you can really tell that they're playing off the audience. The rhythm is there. I really like that. And I think you do get that here, actually. And I've seen a lot of American sitcoms with a very blatant fake laugh track, and it's a laugh track is something that can be done well. Like, you can pump the laughs up and make sure it works, and it can be done really badly. And this felt okay. It felt like the material was there. When you're hearing people laughing, it's like, okay, yeah, there was a joke there. I get it.
Would that have been a live audience? That wouldn't have been a laugh track, would it not?
No, I think this would have been a live. I don't know the production, but yeah, it certainly felt like a live audience. Yeah,
because there were times where I was thinking, blimey, they're loving it. They were like hysterical.
Have you ever been to a TV?
And tried to be the Phantom Laugher. Oh, it was at Granada years ago. I took a group from a youth club that I worked at to go and watch You've Been Framed, and I tried to be the Phantom Laugher. Like do the laughing so I could go home and listen and go, "That's me."
Brilliant.
Was
that Beadle at the time?
It wasn't Beadle. It was Lisa Riley.
I remember it. I went to Telly Addicts in the 80s in Pebble Mill.
Oh.
My mum and dad worked for the Inland Revenue, and some reason the Inland Revenue got a load of tickets to go and see Telly Addicts. And the best thing about it was...
You know exactly what the reason was. Yeah. Noel has some auditory, irrelevant discrepancies there.
Blobby Industries didn't pay much of their tax that year. When we went, the guy from Heidi High was the warm-up man. Felix something? Felix?
Oh, right, yeah. The jockey. Was he a jockey? Have I made that up?
Felix Bonus.
Right.
Yes. No, you're right. He was the guy who looked after the donkeys.
He was warm-up man extraordinaire for many years. That was his bread and butter.
He was very good at it.
He was well known for it.
But a good warm-up man, that's what makes the difference. That's why when you're listening to the soundtrack and you think, God, these people are loving it. What the hell's going on? It's a good warm-up man can take credit for that.
Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Snaveley Manor. I'd like a room. Certainly. Will that be a single or a triple? I beg your pardon? Well, if there were three of you, we could put in a cot at no extra charge. No, I'm alone. But I'm very particular about my accommodations. Yes, I could tell right off that you're a connoisseur of fine hotels. Well, I do spend a lot of time in them in my line of work.
So this Cribbins character, whose name we learn a little later, he does have a very specific set of demands. He is clearly a fastidious kind of character, like Cribbins' Mr. Hutchison was, because he wants a quiet room, spotlessly clean, with a view, southern exposure, a king-size bed, with linen sheets and woolen blankets, and a bowl of fresh fruit on the night table. So he's getting set up as this sort of annoying, very needy guest at this point.
Would you say in a list of sort of things you expect from a hotel room, I don't think clean needs to be said.
No.
I think that's not a specialist demand, is it?
You would hope not.
Well, this is like a roadside motel rather than a sort of English Riviera hotel, isn't it? So perhaps it's less common for the rooms to be spotless.
Do we know where we are? Do we ever find out what city we're in?
I don't think we do. I think we probably would have done if it had carried on.
I was wondering that with what I thought was the Hispanic character. I was wondering if it was, but that was a red herring.
At this point, though, Henry sort of is mindful that this guy might be one of the hotel inspectors that Roger has tipped off his wife about. So Henry gives him the key to his own bedroom because he wants to impress the guy, and he says, "We'll move out." Which is a little bit OTT.
But that kind of spoils the point of, like, oh, we're going to have to pretend this is a hotel room, but actually it's our room. If you just go to the guy, this is our room, we'll move out for you. It sort of misses the point, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, you're removing all the hilarity element, the farcical element of, like, oh, now we have to get all our stuff out before he gets upstairs with the case.
Yeah, there is.
There's a whole episode there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, he could have opened up.
But that's what you were saying about crushing too many
he doesn't
storylines.
tell-
into
He
one
could have
bit.
opened up the drawer and found Betty White Sybil's dildo or something, and they could have made something of that.
Oh, no.
They could have gone in a totally different direction.
So what would happen?
Probably
was,
not very PG.
Sybil doesn't know, and so she comes home half cut, goes straight to the room, gets in bed with the man who's there, and she's a bit saucy because she's
There
drunk.
you go. Writes itself.
Etc. etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then immediately after this, we cut to the opening credits. 6 minutes into a 22-minute
Yeah.
episode.
Credits.
Yeah, they did come a little late, didn't they?
This is a typical American device of the cold open,
Yeah.
isn't it? Where you get
Yeah.
sometimes this was about 5 minutes, sometimes it's 8 minutes or so before the credits roll, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Jesus, has this only just started?
Well, presumably there'd be an ad break there, would there?
So yeah, you do this. You do a scene, get you into the episode, and then go to the adverts because no one's gonna go away then because they're involved, they're entrenched.
Yeah.
And then at the end,
Because we want to know more.
yeah. And then at the end, basically the episode finishes. Then it goes to an advert, and then they come back for like a 30-second epilogue, which usually doesn't add
Yeah.
anything to
Yeah.
the show. But then it goes straight into the next show, so you get that inherited audience.
Ah.
It's to keep you watching through the ads, isn't it, rather than going and making a brew.
Yeah.
Is that to include more revenue from advertising? To have like 2 ad breaks in one show?
Yeah, I guess so. We only have one, don't we, in a half-hour show? But it's specifically to, instead of if you end the show and then have some adverts before the next show, you're going to go, oh well, that show's finished. I'm no longer invested. I'll flick around. I'll see what else is on. But if you end the show and then 10 seconds later you're watching the cold opening of the next show,
Yeah.
you're in it. You're straight away in it, and then you're like, oh yeah,
You're
actually I quite like
already
this, so I'll
invested,
just
aren't you?
watch
You're
it.
in
And then
it.
6
Of course you
minutes
are.
later, when there's
Okay.
an advert, you're like, oh well, okay, I'll go.
What? You just don't
I'll
know
go
what's
make a
going
cup of
on.
tea.
What's happening?
So
Yeah.
I'm actually amazed that it never made its way over to Britain as a marketing
Right.
strategy, because it does make sense.
it does, but there are. I'm not sure the details, but there are quite strict rules about how many adverts you're allowed to have in a specific period, and I think that is basically why we have over here. There are stricter rules about it, so they can only
Yeah.
fit in one ad break.
So, what did we think of the theme tune for Snaveley? I mean, we had Harvey Coleman. Is his name Harvey Coleman? I've
Yes,
forgotten
Harvey
already.
Coleman.
Harvey Coleman and Betty White come up with main billing, and then the rest of the characters. But it was just the exterior of Snaveley Manor, and there was a sort of happy-go-lucky, very trumpety. It was very British sounding, lots of brass and woodwind, with maybe a little bit of slapstick percussion, almost Terry and June-esque. I thought.
Yeah.
This is really interesting to me, Ben, because I know you're a musician, and I don't remember the theme tune at all. I got nothing here.
You said theme tune. I thought there wasn't one, was there?
It's really interesting. That you.
If you just bear with me, I'm going to look it up right now and play it and see because I genuinely can't remember it all.
The only thing that struck me was that they were so different, that there's a causiness to it.
Also, Reg Varney getting on a bus.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Very jaunty.
Reg Varney could be getting on the bus, and Blakey could be mugging at the camera.
Yeah.
It's very British sounding, I think.
Where I watched it, I think it was on YouTube, I was hoping that it hadn't been edited down to without adverts. I really wanted to see some 1978 USA adverts.
Well, do you know that one with with that woman going, "Where's the beef?" And there's another one I loved where it was like old granny going, "Don't you buy no ugly truck."
American adverts are just, they're bonkers.
Okay, so we fade in after the credits to a busy dining room where we see Connie, which is the Polly character, no doubt named after Connie Booth, we assume.
Yes.
She's serving dinner and messing about with the flowers, and we get a little bit of exposition that she is there to learn the hotel business. So she's not an art student.
I like that. I like that little change of character because we don't really see much of her in this episode. But let's think in terms of they were trying to build something for a series. It really allows the Basil character to to be mentor, and I think that suits that Basil character where he thinks, oh, I'm so great, I'm such a big shot, I could teach other people. And it means she kind of has to look up to him, especially if it's like, oh, I'm relying on him to like write a report to get college credit.
True, yeah.
It means there's an authority element there. She can't really push back too much. I quite like that element.
I didn't like that they'd made her such an airhead and so vacuous.
Yeah, I mean, that didn't... Yeah.
She just seemed very goofy. She was quite a goofy character, weren't she? The way that she was laughing and didn't really seem to sort of catch on to what was going on. And yeah, she was very, very different to the Polly. She was recognisable, but not anything like the Polly character.
Yeah, completely underwritten. A bit like the Pedro character.
Yeah, it was very much focused on the Snaveleys, wasn't it? This pilot.
Alan makes a good point there about that could have developed, and you can see how they're setting that up. But certainly with just this pilot.
But I feel like, if you were going to take that to series, you would then look at that and go, okay, what does this character have legs? Maybe we need to give her a bit more agency. Maybe we need to make Petro speak a bit more English, just so that he can do basic things.
Yeah,
I'll speak.
Yeah. So I did kind of like that element. Obviously, it doesn't develop much here. But we talked about in our episode on Fawlty Towers that my first feeling about Polly was like, she doesn't do anything. Like, what's the point? And I think then as you watch more, it's like, okay, you do need that person there. You need that kind of sense of reality there to offset the craziness. But obviously we're losing that with this character. And I think that the Sybil proxy here is the normal one in this bizarre world.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. They've sort of swapped... Well, they've messed about with the traits of all the characters to some extent or another, but they've certainly swapped some of Sybil and Polly's character traits, haven't they? And not to the benefit of the show, I don't think, really.
Yeah, agreed. I think I agree with you, Alan. I think we talked about Polly being the sort of the one who's not a cartoon character.
Yeah.
Whereas, Betty White is Betty White. She's not a cartoon character. She's providing that link to reality.
What we're seeing here is Betty White's Sybil is fraternising with a male guest, and this male guest has got very out of control eyebrows, hasn't he? He's sort of waggling his eyebrows all over the show, overacting somewhat. And this is all to Henry's disdain, and it sort of comes back to what I said earlier, that Henry's clearly got this jealous streak that Basil didn't have. He's really worried, and he accuses Betty White Sybil of fooling around with one of the guests again. So sowing the seed that she's quite promiscuous.
Yes, I picked up that as well. He seems a bit of I'm going to use a word that the kids use. He seems a bit of a cook, doesn't he?
You don't know what that means.
I only sort of 80% know what that means. But no, you're right. She's very flirtatious, and I picked up on that. He said, "Oh, you're messing with the guest again." But then there's a punchline. There's a visual punchline where he takes his little bib off, and he's a vicar, and that's the obviously there's no sexual threat. He's a vicar, which I'm not sure that lands quite as well. yeah, exactly.
Still gets the meal on the house.
It was obvious why he was wearing a bib at the reveal, but prior to that, I was like, why is this old man wearing a fucking bib? He's like a 2-year-old. What's going on?
Yeah, so there's a nice bit here, which again, it feels like an actor's edition as opposed to a writer's edition, where Betty White she says, "Oh, just let me finish my drink," and he goes, right, knocks the drink back, and then goes, "You're finished," like he's struggling to speak. That felt like an actor bringing something to the table, as opposed to that's not an obvious thing to write in a script.
Yeah,
I can't remember. You kind of went in more detail, I suppose. Is there any time in Fawlty Towers where there's a possibility of Sybil philandering and Basil, is he jealous or doesn't care, or is there any of that at all?
Yeah, with Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Oh, yes. With his medallion and his rough charm.
Yeah.
Pretentious, moi. She's very flirty with him. But I think it comes across more as her trying to make Basil jealous and Basil just being irritated by her sort of crassness.
I think that bothers him because this man's like an oaf. If she was flirting with like the Earl of Culdogan, he would be fine with that because
Probably,
Yes,
like,
yeah.
that would be okay.
Yeah, definitely.
He would encourage it.
He took her in.
Yeah, he would tuck her in.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a real jealous streak to him, isn't there? Which, again, I think throwing that in as a character trait could work if that's something you're going to develop over the course of a series, if you're not trying to be too similar to the original.
Yeah, it could have took it in a different direction. I mean, there's plenty of US remakes of British shows that do go on to create their own mythology without wanting to sound too sort of wanky about it, like The Office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first series of The Office was obviously very much based on Ricky Gervais' version,
And it struggles.
but then they found their own feet.
Yeah.
Next in this scene, we get to be introduced to the US version of the Major, who's a very problematic character.
Yeah.
Very.
His name's the Chief. He's a retired police chief rather than a war veteran. And, I mean, he's ostensibly the same character, really, at heart, because he's, a poor memory, a bit dotty.
He seems more aware of it. He seems more aware of his poor memory / dementia.
Well, I thought he seemed drunk.
All right.
Now, and this got me thinking, because I've never considered the Major to be a drunk. But now when I think about it, I'm like, a bit dotty, but a little bit, had a few sherries,
Yeah, it's just leather.
Basil refers to the Major as an old sot a couple of times, I think.
Yes.
So.
But when you think of the Major, you don't think, oh, he's a drunk.
No.
Like, I can see that he might be, but that's not his characteristic. Whereas this guy, the Chief, I was like, oh, this guy's just an aggressive drunk.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Major you consider a racist, but you don't consider a rapist either, which is what this guy, the Chief, he's...
Sex predator.
Yeah, he's a sex predator.
Yeah, so our first introduction, lovely little rape joke, different time.
Indeed.
Yes.
What does he say? Let's have a... He says he's...
Something to do with breathalyzer.
It is to do with the breathalyzer.
Yeah. He says that while he was chief, there was only one allegation of rape in 12 years, a very impressive record, Henry chimes in at this point. Yes. And then the chief says that if that cashier hadn't pressed charges against him, there wouldn't have been any. And there's a big laugh.
Yeah.
Whoa. What the hell? Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll skim over that, I think.
Yes.
Pee-wee Hutchison, Mr. Bishop, he turns up down from his room. He describes his room as adequate, and he's seated. And then Bishop sort of cribbing lines from Cribbins, no pun intended.
That was very intended, don't you lie.
It wasn't. It's not even written in my notes. It just came out. Bishop wants fresh veg, not frozen, just like Mr. Hutchison in Fawlty Towers.
Mm-hmm.
Snavely assures him they were fresh when they were frozen, which again is directly lifted from Fawlty. But then in a surprise move, the Polly character chirps in with that ridiculous laugh.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's just been taken from Sybil and transposed onto,
Indeed.
It didn't land,
this
though. It didn't
Connie
work.
character.
It just didn't work at all.
No.
That is all she has to do, though, in the episode. Like, she does. This poor woman doesn't get much of a chance, does she?
Yeah.
Very one note, isn't she? Yeah. I think, it's apparent, isn't it, that Betty White Sybil is a more sympathetic and normal Sybil than Torquay Sybil.
Yes.
Which is probably why Connie's taken on these irritating traits of hers, so that we can relate more to Betty White Sybil.
Yes.
Whose name we do know at this point, don't we? We know that it's Gladys.
Gladys, yeah.
And that does strike me as possibly being, look, we've got Betty White, let's write to Betty White, what is she good at? As opposed to that's how we've decided to convert this. Like, Betty White is a big enough deal that you just write it to her.
Yeah, but it does feel very clumsily. Just take those characteristics of Polly and stick them on Betty White. Take those characteristics of Sybil and stick them on the Connie character. And I don't feel like there was a lot of thought went into that. It was just a switch and swap.
Do you think there is a lot of thought into this? Because this isn't like a couple of writers coming up with an original idea and trying to develop it and then having to sell it to a studio and having to really justify all your choices, or dare I say have some sort of artistic creative vision behind it. This is, look, this show is popular, let's see if we can remake it and make some money.
Yeah,
you're probably
and
right.
You just hire in a couple of old hands, directors, a couple of script writers, knock this together for us, will you? Write this, do it as like a Harvey Korman type, and it'll work.
It's a vehicle, isn't it? Yeah, it's a vehicle
It
for
feels
him.
like
and
they've sorry, Ben. Like they've sat back on the laurels a little bit and just like the expecting the vehicle to drive itself, whereas maybe if they'd done a little bit more with making it into its own thing, it could have been a success from the start and actually become something.
This is a symptom of the US approach to comedy, though. Is they try and churn out 24 episodes a series, and they don't take the time to craft 6 excellent episodes. There was a podcast, David Tennant was talking to Tina Fey, and for some reason, David Cameron had asked Tina Fey to speak in Britain to try and convince the British to take the American approach to, churning out more episodes, basically, so that they could I don't know why David Cameron was getting involved.
Yeah, what's he getting? What's he doing?
He was Prime Minister at the time, and he wanted Tina Fey to basically try and help Americanise the approach to comedy making. And Tina Fey said, no, we're all jealous of the way you guys do it.
Yeah.
Quite understandably.
There's a big financial reason, isn't it? In order to churn out 20 episodes, you need a room full of writers, and you need to pay a room full of writers.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah,
problem.
but a room full of writers usually aren't able to execute something that's faithful to the original vision.
No, true.
You look at a lot of the best sitcoms that Britain has produced have been written by either one guy, one woman, Carla Lane, or a team of 2, like Esmond and Larby,
A
or
lot of pairs, yeah.
Croft and Perry, or whatever.
Yeah, and
Just tighter into
and I
it.
think the other thing as well is that, you get a setup, you get a bunch of characters and what their thing is and what their story is. Can you get 100 episodes out of that? Or is there kind of it's inevitable you're just going to be milking it dry after 20 episodes,
Yeah.
You see that in a lot of US shows as well. They want to get syndication, which is 100 episodes. So they're just going through the motions to get to 100, because then they make a shed load more money when it's syndicated to other networks around the world. It's a broken system, I think, really. And why Cameron wanted to instigate it in Britain. I mean, why Cameron did a lot of things, I don't know.
I suppose it depends what your objective is. If your objective is to fill the schedules and sell advertising, then who cares how good it is?
Yeah. Mr. Bishop, which is the Hutchison character, the Cribbins character, he pops out to make a phone call, and meanwhile Gladys shows another guest, Mr. Foley, into the dining room and allocates him Mr. Bishop's empty table. Pedro comes over to take his order, which he obviously doesn't understand. And then Henry comes back in, demanding to know who this new guest is and why he's sitting at Bishop's table, and forcibly moves him. He's far more... I know we're doing the comparison thing again, but he's far ruder than Basil. Basil's rudeness is subtle, I think.
Basil has his moments, but it's usually build up to it.
Yeah, it's pace, like we've said, isn't it?
Yeah.
He doesn't go from 0 to 60 at such a pace as Henry here does. And Henry explains to Foley that Pedro's an Albanian refugee at this point. He can't speak English, and you might as well give your order to the cat, which is another line directly from Fawlty.
Poor Pedro.
But then he wishes him a bon appetit. Is that how they say it in America? Bon appetit.
Probably. Yeah.
They don't even bother putting a French inflection on
So
it.
there's a physical gag here, which I quite liked, and I can't remember if it is a Manuel thing or not, or if it's new, where the man points at the menu, like saying, I want this, to Petro, and Petro just puts his finger on the menu and then tries to walk
keeps his finger on the thing.
chef. Is that a new gag? I don't remember that in Fawlty Towers.
I think so.
That works. I'm all right with that.
Yeah,
that was fine.
I like
It
that.
did work, it was good. But then they overcooked it, they over-egged it by making him put his finger through the menu slightly later, didn't they?
Yeah.
Which didn't really work. Yeah. Just as in the original, Henry is told by his wife that Bishop isn't a hotel inspector. He sells hardware, not spoons, like Mr. Hutchison. So Snaveley is outraged that he was pretending to be a hotel inspector, which of course he wasn't. And he pulls up a seat right at Bishop's table to intimidate him, which is a little bit weird. And Connie brings the wrong order. Bishop starts complaining. And like we're saying, the pacing's off because Henry immediately declares, right, Mr. Bishop is taking over and running the hotel, and he's almost about to assault Bishop before Gladys comes in and prevents that from happening.
I didn't order this.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you did.
I changed my order. What's wrong with you people?
You want to run this place?
What? Connie, Mr. Bishop is taking over the hotel. I'm having his beef stew. It's not my beef stew.
Henry? What's going on?
I'm just making Mr. Bishop more comfortable, dear.
What you get with Basil a lot is the passive aggressiveness. And is that quite a British thing?
Definitely.
Americans are just a bit more in your face about things,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah, I think that when you said earlier that he's rude, I want to say he's rude to Cribbins. I think Basil Fawlty he's not rude, he's exasperated and people just get in his way. Whereas this character is directly rude at you. Thank you very much. And it's just it just feels a bit more personal. And perhaps that is a British thing, that passive aggressiveness.
Yeah, it's far more obvious and out there, isn't it? Snaveley's rudeness.
It's more aggressive.
Yeah, he's definitely aggressive. He's now attending to Mr. Foley, who wishes to see the wine list, which Snaveley Manor doesn't have. It's just table wine, Henry explains. Mr. Foley's not happy with this, so Henry announces to the disinterested room that there's another wise guy here who wants to take over running the hotel, which is, again, very in your face.
Bit much.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Foley says, "I assure you we are not in the hotel business," which sort of triggers something in Henry's mind. Oh, who's this we? Mm-hmm. Could it possibly refer to the collection of hotel inspectors? But I think that was poor writing, because surely if they're hotel inspectors, they are in the hotel business. So maybe he could have been a bit more ambiguous with that statement, you know?
Yeah. The idea is he's, so quick to deny it that he has to be. Obviously, a hotel inspector would say they're not in the hotel business.
Yeah. What Henry does at this point is, much like Basil, he flips from being obnoxious, although in a different way. He flips to that sort of sycophantic, fastidious mode, trying to make sure everything is to Mr. Foley's liking. But yeah, again, it's over-egged, because rather than just smelling the cottage cheese on Mr. Foley's plate, he actually dips his hooter right into it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Before declaring it smells good. It's a little bit much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it would, like the gag of dragging his plate out from under him and having a big old lungful of it, that would have been that's funny.
Yeah,
you
that's
don't need to have cottage cheese on the end of his nose when he puts it down.
No.
You know what really struck me about this? The man orders the diet plate.
Yeah.
What's a diet plate?
I wanted to know what was on that plate.
Well, it has cottage cheese on it, I suppose. That's your diet cheese.
Oh.
How is cottage cheese in a diet food, is it?
It is in America.
I don't know much about it. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's not got bacon on it.
Yeah.
I just like the idea of, like, I don't want a healthy option. I just want to know what I should eat if I'm on a diet. Just give me the diet plate.
Diet plate, yeah.
It's like a restaurant with one vegetarian option. Would you like the lamb, the chicken, the fish, or the vegetarian option? Whatever the hell that is.
We actually get Harvey Korman's best bit, in my opinion. You guys might disagree with this, but
Go on.
Mr. Bishop shouts over to summon Snaveley. He says, "Snaveley!" And Harvey Korman sort of turns around and does a really, really good sneer, almost something like Gru from Despicable Me would do. It sort of turns and growls and sneers in the direction of this guy before he heads over to see what he wants. Mm-hmm. I thought he did that rather well.
Well, there are a couple of moments in Fawlty Towers, aren't there, where you sort of see Basil twitching a little bit and type of thing. So maybe that was the inspiration for that.
But just hyped up to 11. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he gets physical with him, doesn't it? It all gets a bit physical.
Yeah.
This is another example of just not doing the pacing. Mr. Bishop's dissatisfied. They messed up his bill. So Snaveley starts to choke him straight off the bat. Just chokes him. Not only does he choke him, he picks him up, punches him at least 4 times in the guts, gives him a few slugs right in the midriff, and then puts him in a headlock. So Bishop certainly has more of an excuse to have lost consciousness than Mr. Hutchison did in Fawlty Towers, because he gets a severe beating.
Exactly.
Snaveley! Coming, sir. Why am I being charged for beef stew, a cheese omelet, and a diet plate? This hotel is a rip-off. Shut up. Bit of cheese caught in his throat. Just stay calm, sir. We'll have that out in a jiffy. The Heimlich method never fails with chokers. I insist that our whole staff master it. Don't let it disturb your dinner, Mr. Bowling. Just finish your cottage. There now, Mr. Bishop, not choking on that nasty cheese anymore.
I've written down here, this is too violent. But
Yes.
But I think actually, on reflection, it's not that it's too violent. It's too unsubtle. That's the truth of it. It's just too brutal. Is perhaps a better word because it's got a double meaning. But yeah, it's just unsubtle.
I mean, punching him repeatedly in the guts is, that's the main problem for me. The headlock and the choking is, to be honest, it's a little bit difficult to believe in Fawlty Towers, but punching the guest 4 or 5 times in the guts in front of all other diners, that's just a bridge too far for me, I'm afraid. And then in the next scene, when we fade up, this being America, Gladys says, Mr. Bishop's going to sue us.
Yeah, that's very American.
And that's that scene done. We can move on. Forget that happened. We've got a fire alarm to deal with.
Yeah.
Really clunky, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've crowbarred in the second episode they wanted to adapt here.
Yeah.
And this is Henry saying he's going to impress Mr. Foley by running a fire alarm, because obviously guests love nothing more than being disturbed by fire drill. I don't really follow that logic, but
to be fair though, the fire alarm, the Germans episode where the fire alarm happens in Fawlty Towers, it's a whole hodgepodge of things. That is not a well structured episode. It's just like, oh, here's the hospital thing. Oh, here he's gone for a fire alarm. Oh, now there's some Germans here and he's doing a German accent. It doesn't work particularly well as a structure, but
I don't think it does, and I think it's one of the most overrated Fawlty episodes. But I was on the subreddit for Fawlty Towers the other day, and it was voted the best episode in Series 1.
Really? No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. It's certainly not my favourite.
No.
It's iconic because of the walk and the Germans and everything.
I think perhaps relative to what we're talking about now, one of the reasons it's not my favourite is it's just a bit much. It's a little bit too much.
You said that, didn't you, Al, when we did that?
Yeah, just too frenetic and just too chaotic, and you don't know what's coming next, and it just didn't. The flow was just off in that episode. But I feel like this episode of Snaveley is very similar. Things just seem to have been thrown in, and it all just goes off, and you don't know which way things are going.
Agreed.
I think your phrase was migraine-inducing.
Yes. I found quite a lot of Fawlty Towers quite migraine-inducing.
Dear John will be a lot more gentle.
I know, I'll be able to just lie down with a blanket on. Amazing.
So the Snaveleys are busy prepping to sleep in the office at this point because, as we know, they've already given away their room to Mr. Bishop, who they thought was a hotel inspector. No, they don't want to upset him any further after he's had GBH at Henry's hands. Mr. Foley appears at this point demanding to know what's going on, and Henry says it's a test of the system, declaring to him, "Your valuables are snafe at Snaveley Manor," which just didn't land, did it?
You set off the burglar alarm.
What was that? Oh, the burglar alarm, Mr. Foley, just running a check on our security system. Your valuables are snafe here at Snaveley Manor.
Now then, what our listeners will know, one of my pet hates is the fake Freudian tits. I mean slip. Right? I hate that. I absolutely hate that. But very close behind it is the fake spoonerism, where they do something like this and it's just terrible. Like, no one speaks like that. No one ever says that. It's not a thing that happens in reality. I hate it. Your valuables are snafe here at Snaveley Manor. Oh my God, I feel dirty.
So it transpires that Pedro got confused between the burglar and the fire alarm. He's already turfed everyone out of the dining room when the burglar alarm went off, before Henry had the chance to run the fire drill.
It's a semitone higher.
Well, we don't get that, do we, here? It's almost the exposition is this all happened off camera. Just deal with it, because it'll confuse you. So...
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Petro's ushered everyone out of the restaurant into the driveway. That might be funny if we saw that, him panicking and running around in a Manuel kind of way. But we don't. We just get someone else telling us that it's happening.
Yeah, and then we get a flashback to the chief is a rapist joke when Connie declares she won't go upstairs to lead the guests to the fire escape because the last time she went up there, the chief tried to give her a sobriety test, which is references the euphemism in his earlier story. And again, it just seems to be a very jovial joke.
Oh, good old Connie being sexually harassed in the workplace.
Yeah.
Oh, how we laugh.
And talk of the devil, the creepy old predator turns up in the lobby at this point, doesn't he? Brandishing a Colt 45 and yelling, "You're under arrest."
Yeah. Because he thinks the burglar alarm's gone off. Oh, by the way, we missed over that. Pedro, when Fawlty is Snaveley is trying to explain burglar to him, he says, "Bandito?" Is that Albanian? Bandito? Is that Albanian?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have not got a word of Albanian, so it might be Albanian for burglar, but it sounds suspiciously like Spanish to me.
But at this point, the pandemonium has led all the guests into the lobby, so they're all stood around waiting for the fire drill, much to Henry's irritation, just like the Fawlty Towers episode. However, unlike the Fawlty Towers episode, we pan to the kitchen and we see Pedro's. Presumably, is cooking up an Albanian stew or something.
Yeah, I don't know what he's
cooking up a pan of...
Is it a paella equivalent?
Yeah, it's
in
apropos of nothing that he just seems to be cooking. I mean, I suppose they've got no chef in this one. There's no Terry.
Mm-hmm.
No.
But it just suits the mashed up plot that he is cooking and starts a real life fire coinciding with the drill. And just like in the Fawlty original, Henry / Basil ignores Pedro / Manuel when he's shouting fire, fire, and he locks him in the kitchen. Exactly the same, except presumably the actor didn't get third-degree burns like Andrew Sachs.
And a payoff.
Yeah, and a payoff from the BBC of like £100 or something pathetic. Yeah.
Righteous bucks.
Well, there's more than he earned for doing Fawlty Towers.
Probably.
He's on £8 a week or something.
Yeah.
So at this point, smoke's billowing out of the kitchen and Snaveley starts yelling, "Fire, fire, run for your lives." And Henry accidentally sets off the extinguisher directly into Mr. Foley's midriff.
This is... Okay, right. We finally get some slapstick, which is what I want from a Fawlty Towers style show, okay? You need a bit of physical comedy in there. We're finally doing something, and the camera misses the money shot. The extinguisher goes off all over this guy, and it's just looking at his face. And then awkwardly pans down, like zooms out and pans down. Like, oh, look, there's all the extinguisher fluid.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. That was weird. That was, and I thought, well, is that deliberate? Or did they only got one suit? They can't do it again. I don't know. I don't know what's going on
I think
here.
there is a fair bit of slapstick in this, to be honest. There's Henry gets his tie stuck in the drawer early on, and then Pedro's finger going through the menu that we mentioned. The assault on Mr. Bishop's fairly slapstick.
That was just aggressive.
And then here we get Pedro hanging onto Snaveley's feet, don't we? As he's dragged through even after the fire threat has passed.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why that's happening, but it's quite funny. It works quite well, that.
But that's the beauty of when it happens in Fawlty Towers. You know, Basil locks Manuel in a burning kitchen, doesn't realise it's burning. And then so when he finally lets him out, Manuel, and this is the crucial element of these characters, Manuel says, "Oh, thank you, you've saved me," or, you know, whatever he actually says.
Yeah, that's missed here, right?
But that's the whole point of the Manuel character. You bully him and berate him, but then when you stop, he's like, "Oh, great, you've made my life better by stopping." Thanks. Yeah. He's an eternal optimist in many ways. So we don't get any of that sort of the levels of character in that. He just decides to fall to the floor and then grab onto the guy's legs.
Yeah. I guess when Gladys takes the hydrant and deals with the fire, Henry's begging Foley not to include this in his report at this point. He's saying, "Don't mention it, it'll close us down and everything." But the Foley character reacts very differently than Mr. Wolf, as we called him, in the Fawlty original.
Oh, so sorry, Mr. Foley. Nothing like this has ever happened before. You won't put this in your report, will you?
What are you talking about?
Look, there'll be no charge for your room. You don't have to give us a recommended rating. You don't have to give us any rating at all. Just forget all about Snaveley Manor. What? It's not just a business, Mr. Foley. This is my life. Oh, for heaven's sake, the international hotel guy doesn't have to know he's staying here, do they?
The what?
The international hotel. Oh. You're not a hotel inspector?
No, I'm not a hotel inspector. I wish to God I were.
Well, forget what I said about no charge. You'll pay like everybody else, you four-flusher.
he says, "I'm not a hotel inspector. I wish to hell I was," and he storms off upstairs. It's a lot more dramatic than the guy who was in town for an outboard motor conference.
Yeah.
He played it a lot more understated, more bemused, wasn't he? That guy.
Yeah.
Which I think suited the requirement of the script, really.
Yeah. But well, look, it's just another example of this everything turned up to 11 problem.
Yeah, he's really quite hammy in his denial of being a hotel inspector. But this is where we effectively end the episode. It says, "Stay tuned, Snaveley will return in a moment," which is what you talked about earlier, Alan, and there will be now a shed load of ads followed by a stinger scene, which didn't have much value in itself. I'll just cover it quickly. The post-advert scene is the real hotel inspectors turning up, just as Messrs. Bishop and Foley are about to depart. And I think one of them, can't remember which, declares that Snaveley Manor is the worst hotel they've ever been in, and Henry's yelling after them, saying, "Don't come back." But weirdly, I guess the key difference again here is that rather than look at Henry with contempt for ballsing everything up, lovely Betty White Sybil is like, "Oh, come here and have a hug," and consoles him and tells him he can hang up his goat, and she'll even help and gives him a lovely warm embrace, and it's like a lovely cuddly warm, everything's all right in the end finale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good observation, Ben, because Sybil would never have done that. She would have been filled with
Backed him.
contempt
She'd have
for
backed
him.
him with a newspaper.
With her in luck and just walked away, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, with her in luck. That's the Sybil way.
When I was thinking about with our deep dives, we tend to do like an MVP. So we choose. We didn't do it with Fawlty Towers because it would just end up being Polly for every single episode. But when I thought about who would be the MVP in this particular episode, it would be the Mrs. Snaveley. It would be the Betty White character because of that. She just seemed far more a loving character and less acerbic, and just someone that wanted the playoff between her and her husband was fun to watch. But I generally thought that she was a nice character, a nice person.
Yeah.
Whether it had legs or not, if it had been picked up, I don't know.
I think you definitely need to beef up the Connie character, make that a better character, and probably a bit more with Petro.
Yes.
I think the big problem with this is that it's only got 2 characters, really.
Yeah.
You know, with a couple of other little sort of cipher characters.
Yes.
Whereas Fawlty Towers had 4. It was an ensemble. It had four main actors.
And one thing that they always did with Fawlty Towers was not only with your 4 main characters, as in everyone was involved and you could throw in, "Oh, here's an idea." You know, the writing was there, but you could chip in and it was kind of an open forum. You have guest stars coming in each week, and because John Cleese is casting people that he knows, he's worked with before, he's bringing in people he can trust, so they're welcome to kind of go, "Oh, I was thinking about doing this. What do you think of that?"
Yeah.
But with this, you've got Harvey Keitel and Betty White. Like I say, they're TV royalty even at this stage. They're well-known people. And you've got that other bloke and that other woman who are nobodies, complete nobodies, just chancing their arm at pilot season. But I'm assuming, I'm sure Betty White and Harvey Keitel are wonderful to work with. But that's not a balanced system, is it? It's not a system where you go, "Oh, we better make sure these guys get some good lines as well."
Yeah.
You've got 2 actors that you're selling this on, and you give them all the material.
And if anything, it looked like it was going to just show a frustrated hotelier in a happy marriage, which wasn't really the faulty premise at all, was it? Maybe 1970s America couldn't handle a battle axe undermining the male lead. I don't know, but I just thought without that conflict between, there was a lot of repressed sexual energy in Basil.
Yes.
It's just not evident here at all. He's probably getting his oats every night, this fella.
Well, the thing is, what a beautiful 70s sitcom phrase, getting your ups.
A bit crampy.
Why Basil works so well is because everything in the world is designed to infuriate him.
Yeah.
So his marriage is, a constant frustration. The hotel guests are a frustration. Everything about the hotel, everything he's trying to do, it's going to break or something's going to fall apart or whatever. He gets builders in and they're useless. And as much as you can say a lot of that is his own fault and whatever, but that's the whole point. That's the constant stress, and we build and we build and we build until we get to a point where he finally breaks and thrashes the car or whatever. Whereas this, it's just like, why is this guy angry? He's got a nice supportive wife who's obviously trying to help, and we don't even get, oh, I wish my employees were better. I'm so frustrated by this guy, because you don't get a chance to build on that. It's just like, oh, he doesn't speak English. He's a bit of an idiot.
Although you have to say, he doesn't assault the Manuel character in the same way that Cleese did. There's less physical attacks on Pedro, which I think is probably a good thing. I was always a little bit uncomfortable with. You know, when he pokes him in the eye and hits him on the head with a spoon? It's just a bit much.
Yeah. Well, I reckon, I've written down here the comparison, and, Pedro versus Manuel, Connie versus Polly, we've talked about. There's not really a comparison at all there. The Chief is a lot less... there's no redeeming features about the Chief versus the Major.
No.
I think with Snaveley, he is... This is a weird thing to say, because we've just listed all the horrible things about Basil Fawlty, but he is sympathetic. You do feel sympathy for him, because you see the circumstances that have driven him to where he's got to.
Yeah, and that's Sybil a lot of the time. That's why you need Sybil
and
to be...
it is Sybil a lot of the time, exactly. But so without that, Betty White's doing a great job, but without that instigator of Sybil, he's just a horrible bloke. That's not good enough. That's not subtle enough.
It'd be interesting to compare and contrast against the other versions, but I'm not sure I've got it in me to sit through Amanda's and talk about it for 2 hours. To be honest with you,
no. I think we've done the US versions here. I don't think we need this to be an annual.
Yeah,
thing.
we've kicked the arse out of it.
Well, it's time to take a little trip to the place that long ago was hip. It's Fashion Corner, it's Fashion Corner, it's Fashion Corner, Fashion Corner.
Oh. So as with Fawlty Towers, Snaveley set during the late 1970s, so the dress and the fashions that were on show in this episode were quite recognisable. Although I was interested before I started to see the potential differences, if there were any, between the styles of the UK and the USA. We found that sort of the tail end of the 70s in Fawlty Towers, there were lots of block colours, and I was interested to see whether that was something that transferred across to the States. There were lots of floaty fabrics, floaty man-made fabrics, I should add, on display, which were obviously de rigueur at the time and were quite apparent in Fawlty Towers. So on both sides of the Atlantic, they were probably advised to not sit near any open flames, because everything would have just gone up, I think.
Do you know what? I thought that actually when Petro accidentally starts the fire.
Yes.
I thought his hair looks very flammable.
Just gone.
Like Michael Jackson in the Pepsi advert.
Oh God.
Exactly, yeah. It was just a bit too... I was worried.
Well, that leads me in nicely to Petro, actually. So like the Manuel character, he's dressed in what we recognise as being sort of like that bellboy, waiter, hotel uniform. Although they have done a massive transformation, and he's sort of gone from the chef's whites look that he had to this strong mustard yellow colour of jacket.
Very striking.
A completely shapeless jacket.
It
as well.
was,
It's just
yeah.
like a boxy
It was.
jacket.
It was like he was like a small child wearing his dad's suit. Just very sort of boxy looking, with like a black trim around the cuffs. So that straight away was something that was markedly different.
What I like about Manuel actually is that when we see him relaxing in Basil the Rat,
Yes.
he's in his bedroom, he's got his work clothes on underneath his dressing gown.
His dressing gown. I loved that. Because he can just take it off at like a moment's notice and then rush back down and just carry on with his job, which I'm sure
So
it
sweet.
probably happened.
That's the word I kept using about Manuel. He's just so sweet.
He is so sweet. He is so sweet.
It's lovely.
And that's what I think this character didn't have. It didn't have that sweetness to it, unfortunately. Whether that would have happened or not, I don't know. Mrs. Snaveley in the opening scenes is in like a delicate pale... It was hard to tell whether it was a pale blue or a white. It could have been a combination of both. Blouse and skirt combo with a floral pattern that ran across the front of the blouse and across the back as well. And in keeping with the design of the times, had this big open collar. The blouse is very light and floaty, and the skirt, which was in like a matching baby blue collar, had a tie waist. She also appears later on, post-dinner, in a pale turquoise collared skirt suit with what I've recently found out are called bishop sleeves. Not Mr. Bishop, but bishop sleeves. These sort of like baggy, with like a cuff and then like baggy arms to them. So there is a name.
Hide your Bible up there.
There is a name. Yeah, there's a name.
I thought they were called wizard sleeves, but then that's used as a euphemism for something else, isn't it?
Not when you're referring to Betty White. No. Mr. Snaveley had the, I don't know what I see as being a typical 1970s combo of powder blue slacks and lemon yellow shirts, which you see, I don't know, I just picture like a lineup picture in a golf club in the 70s and everyone having them slacks and that colour of shirts. And he also adds a powder blue jacket later on in the scene with a bright red carnation, which is something else I sort of think about with I think of Ted Bovis from Heidi High with a red,
that's a great
red carnation lingering.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison. I like it.
The Connie character, obviously, she's we didn't sort of hear much from her or get much development from her character. However, she is bizarrely she was dressed in this floral blouse and a powder pink skirt for her job and waitressing, but there was no real, it didn't point to what she did within the hotel until they put that Victorian style maid hat on, which then indicated she's going to be a waitress. That's what she does.
Yeah.
So it was a really odd juxtaposition, I thought, of this modern looking 70s attire with this old fashioned headwear, which I think that was the only thing that was there for, was to go, that's Polly, that's the Polly character.
So I'll buy that definition if the hat defines the waitress.
Yes.
Could she have been wearing literally anything, but with that hat on, and you would have known?
And you would have known. I think she could have. Yes, I think she could.
Yeah, okay.
I think it was the and it felt like a prop. It felt more like a prop than fashion. It felt like it was just an indicator of this is who this is. This is the waitress, everybody.
Okay.
Mr. Snaveley appears later on again in a more sombre suit. It's like a fawn brown colour when he's sort of like being more action hotelier rather than relaxed hotelier, I felt. And he had a pale blue shirt and a blue tie on as well.
That suit felt very 1978.
That colour.
You know, it reminded me of Joe Wilkinson, the comedian. He always wears that horrible brown suit, but which is funny because it's dated.
Yes,
that's the joke.
It's that colour is very set in that time. Yes, yeah. If you had like a timeline, it would fit within the 70s. That colour.
Mm-hmm.
Special mentions to a few items that I spotted as I was watching. The Vickers plastic lobster bib. I thought, I think any food that requires an adult bib I'm all for that. It's thumbs up from me. And I did like the joke of the fact that it was hiding the priest's dog collar underneath. Thought that was quite a good visual gag. The chief's cardigan. You might have missed it, but it was one of those I remember my granddad having one in the 80s, and it was like a zip-up cardigan with a pattern on the front that men of a certain age wore, and my granddad used to put it on over. We've talked about this in the podcast about men of a certain age who would always dress in shirt and tie no matter what, even if they'd been retired 10 years. In the 80s, they would still have a shirt and tie on, and then you put on this like occasion cardigan that just zips up and covers everything up, and it's just for doing anything in. You could go out for a meal, you could be in the garden, you could be doing anything in that occasion cardigan, and the chief had one of those on. And finally, Mr. Foley's glasses. I've gone to town on this, actually. Mr. Fawley? Fawley.
Mr. Fawley.
Mr. Fawley's glasses. Yeah, he had these kind of thick, rimmed version of aviator glasses. I like glasses. I do like glasses, so I noticed people's glasses.
Interesting, okay.
And they were... They're quite large frames, and they had like this extra brow bar across the top, which you see on aviator glasses.
Yes.
And for years, this style, in my humble opinion, gave off a bit of a 1970s serial killer vibe. and if you sort of...
I know what you mean now that you've said it, yeah.
You see pictures of like Dennis Nielsen, them glasses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they are of a type of person, in my opinion. However, in recent times, I think these glasses are making a comeback, because I seem to see them everywhere at the moment. I think even like high-end fashion houses like Gucci are now bringing back these, not the thin framed wire gold glasses, but more of a chunky version of these aviator glasses. And when I saw them on this character, I thought, God, they would work now. And I could see someone wearing those now. And in fact, in House of Gucci, which is out this month, starring Adam Driver, he has these glasses on. And obviously this film is set in the same time period that Snaveley would have been. But I can see these glasses now making a massive comeback because of somebody like Adam Driver.
Interesting.
Wearing them on the big screen. So yeah, I was massively in love with these glasses.
I'm pretty sure that those glasses were worn by the American guest in Fawlty Towers as well, weren't they?
Yes, they were. They were worn by him.
Yes.
But they were like the thin wire version, almost like the guy off Jaws, which he reminds me of.
Oh, Roy Schneider.
Yes. If I think of Roy Schneider, I think of those glasses. So they were very, very big. They were quite iconic and point to the 70s. But I think they're something that would make a comeback in their more chunky form and less serial killer looking. They're not just for serial killers, they're for anyone now. Anyone can wear them.
What about props? Was there any 1970s props that you noticed, that anyone noticed that jumped out at you? I've got one. When Snaveley was at the desk signing in one of the guests, and he was sort of making notes on a sort of wooden bureau type thing that was sat on top of the counter, and then he spun the thing round 180 degrees so that the customer could sign the bit of paper. I thought that was brilliant. It was like a rotational bureau.
Oh, I like everything in the 70s rotated, and I love that. We had yes. It was called it was called a Party Susan, and it's what you put all your nuts and your crisps in, and you put it in the middle of the table and you spun it round. And I think was it called a party? Was it a Party Susan?
Was it a lazy Susan?
It was a lazy Susan, but in my house we called it a Party Susan, and nobody else in the world called it that. And
because it was for pies.
Do you know what? That is a really sound observation. Everything in the 70s rotated. You are so right.
Whenever you tell that story about the Party Susan, I'm reminded of that hashtag for Susan Boyle's album party. Susanal Bum Party. Yeah.
Susanal Bum Party.
Anal Bum Party.
Hashtag Party Susan.
So, thanks for joining us, Alan and Gareth.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
I expect we'll put them out as Christmas specials, I think, and then we'll get into Dear John in the new year. On the subject of Dear John, before we get stuck into the first episode of Dear John, Gareth and Alan have kindly saved us the bother of having to do a generic overview of Dear John by doing it on their podcast. So do look up the British Sitcom History Podcast, BritCompod on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, BritCompod on Facebook and Instagram. And we've got, if you look at British Sitcom History Podcast on Facebook, we're on there as well.
So you've got 2 episodes dedicated to Dear John. You've got 2 episodes dedicated to Fawlty Towers.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 2 episodes dedicated to Only Fools and Horses, the Grandad years. So I'm looking forward to the Uncle Albert years.
Yeah, we'll be doing those again.
Lots to jump into, and it's a really, really well researched and very thorough. And like I say, everything that we're not. So give them a try. They're excellent. And we'll be back with the first episode of Dear John, probably mid-January, I think, Al. Is that fair? Ish?
Yes.
A tentative yes.
I hope so. Goodbye.